First, I'd like to welcome all of our attendees to the Windshire Group's Ask the Expert series, How to Leverage the Digital Revolution in Early Stage Companies, with our special guest from the Court Square Group. My name is Jen Bardsley, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's webinar. I currently serve as the account manager slash operations manager for the Windshire Group. So I would like to note that the views expressed in this webinar are those of the panelists. It's for informational purposes only. It's not intended as legal or regulatory advice. And to introduce our panelists, we have Dr. James Blackwell, who's president and principal consultant for the Windshire Group, which was founded in 2011. The Windshire Group accelerates development and manufacturing for commercializing therapies and provides quality expertise. Dr. Blackwell has been a leading industry consultant for more than 15 years. And we also have Keith Parent, who is a founder and CEO of Court Square Group. He leads the company and the vision for using IT as a strategic enabler for life science companies from preclinical all the way to manufacturing.
The webinar today really is the marriage of the user requirements for small companies and the marriage of that and the IT structure and organization of the company. It's a very important factor. And why is this important? This is very important for small companies because it's important for them to improve their operational efficiency. People spend less time looking for stuff, and it speeds up your business processes. And you want to facilitate decision making. You want to be able to access the most current and correct information, and it increases organizational value. A disorganized information with their information all over the place can kill a deal. We've seen that happen. Due diligence and data rooms need to be well designed and populated with good information to facilitate deal making. So that can be very important to small companies. And you're creating very valuable information. And this will be important later for your regulatory filings and for compliance needs, and for your technical people who want to access and understand the history in terms of what's happening within the organization. So this helps you avoid compliance issues later, patient privacy laws, health authority issues, or potentially even SEC violations. And also it creates a more satisfied workforce. Studies have shown people are happier when they're dealing with environments that are well organized and they're able to work efficiently. Nobody wants to be in a cumbersome, inefficient, time-wasting environment.
And moving on to question number 2. We are expanding to new facilities, including laboratories and manufacturing. How can we unify our systems and generate actionable business intelligence from data across disparate systems, departments, and locations?
Jen, I'll start with this one. This is actually an example from a client project in the gene and cell therapy space. And so where we started was creating a data hierarchy as part of developing the IT roadmap for them. Data is represented at various levels, starting at the very low levels, which is your very primary data that's created at the source. And then as you go up, you have higher order systems with greater governance. But nevertheless, all these systems are involved with the patient at some level. And so this is what we call a needle to needle process. So even before the sample is drawn from the patient, there's data being generated at the care center, treatment center for this patient that becomes important compliant data that will feed into this system. And so the storage of that sample, shipping, goes on site, gets processed, it's tested, released by QA, then gets shipped back to the patient. Just think of all the data that needs to be compliant that's handled by that. And even post-treatment follow-up becomes data that the organization will need to track. So nevertheless, it starts, all this data, one way is to deal with this that Keith can elaborate on is creating a data lake. And that's where all the data goes. You throw all that data there. That's not a bad thing. You just need a means to find that data, organize that data, and present it to the end users in a way that they can readily use to make decisions and document things from a compliant standpoint.
I think, James, to your point, I think that data lake and gathering all that data where it could be in a central location for everybody to use that for different systems, because different people need, there's a different need for it. If I'm a quality person, I need it for one thing. If I'm somebody in finance, I need it for another. If I'm on the manufacturing floor, then I need it for something else. I think the big part here, this is just illustrating how all the way from the initial time that you talk to a patient all the way through when you get back to that patient. There's so many different people that need the data across the board. We just mentioned the fact that you may have a data steward, or you may have a group that's going to work on naming conventions and how it all works together. Just look at on the right-hand side of this diagram, how many different systems are out there that you may have to work with. And if you look at them across the board, you may find that there's integration aspects of every single one of those. How do we reconcile that? How do we work with that? It's a nightmare if you don't think about that and plan for that. So our goal here is just to talk to you about why do we put these things in place. And in our respect, and I think that James and I both agree on this, you can't start early enough in this process. I think, when you first start, it's hard sometimes for these early stage companies coming out of a lab. You're so focused in on just getting the results you need from a scientific perspective that you don't think about the business aspects in the long run. And as you start getting out there and you get funding, you go out and start to do this stuff. You may think, well, we'll get a package and it'll solve this problem. That's not the way it works. I mean, there's lots of interaction across the spectrum of your systems that you're going to have.
And to Keith's point, this slide here is really a process-centric view, but the next slide shows how, for the same project, level 5 is above this. So this is sort of the overarching infrastructure. And so this is in this particular project was Microsoft-centric. This isn't the only solution, obviously. It's just an example. So obviously they're using Office 365, but everyone who subscribes to Office 365 has access to Power Apps, Power BI. This is one means. There are others out there, but this is one means of meeting the requirements that Keith just spoke to for organizations. Next slide.
Well, I think also, James, to your point about the different levels and how they have to interact. By using some of these tools, you'll be able to pull data out of different systems at different levels, and we'll put the appropriate dashboards together for the right audience that's going to look at that data. And I think that's what's really important. At the executive level, they kind of want to see that overview. But when I'm on the factory floor and I need to see detailed, real-time data, we have to be able to give them that capability to be able to see that.
Absolutely. And you can parse those things out in terms of what's compliant GXP type data versus what's business type of data that isn't within the remit of the FDA and health authorities. Any comments on this slide, Keith? I think we've spoken.
Yeah, I think, James, this side, there's a couple of key points in this one. When we talk about metadata and governance models, what is the purpose of doing metadata definition or having governance model? It was for a particular project, but everybody should understand that when we're classifying data or we're using data across multiple systems, there's going to be a way that we want to classify our data, and metadata is a great way of doing that. It could be from the content within the documents that you have, or it could be specifically generated by machinery that's creating some output, or it could be a shipping manifest from something that's coming in or going out to somebody else. That chain of custody, James just talked about that needle to needle. Imagine if you're the patient, you want to make sure that when you give your cells to somebody, you want to make sure it's your cells that you get back into your body. So those are the kind of things that we want to make sure that we're looking. And there's new technologies out there, things like blockchain to help with some of this stuff. You don't need to know the specific about how that all works, but you do need to know that somebody's thinking about that and they're putting it in. And most of that is all for quality or regulatory tracking. The concept of the governance model is really around who's going to access the data. Is it internal departments looking at the data, or is it external? Is it customers or vendors, or is it somebody else that's going to look at it? Is it a regulator that may look at it? So by putting that governance model in place, we're going to give the appropriate security and the access into that data. And I think that's someplace that people may short shift that sometimes and open it up wide to different groups, and all of a sudden realize that, hey, these people really shouldn't be seeing some of this data. So that's where it's important that you have that group internally to your company that can identify how do we want to lay this out when we start.
Absolutely, Keith. We're working with a client now that's building a facility, and we're already thinking about this and helping them put this into place. Thanks.